but I am thrilled to have this chance to be here with all of you. I want to give a shout out to the overflow room. They're down the corridor. They're watching us and hearing everything that goes on. I'm sorry that we ran out of space, but actually it's kind of a good thing we ran out of space. We have so much interest, so many people who are here with us. I also want to thank this amazing school. Thank you to the principal and the assistant principal for the expeditionary learning that occurs here at King Middle School. Well, this is my inaugural visit to Maine to get us organized for the caucus to lead the way to carrying Maine in the 2016 election and putting a Democrat back in the White House. I'm pleased that the Mayor of Portland, Mayor Brennan, former Governor Baldacci, and other elected officials from the State House and Senate are with us because I think they understand, as we all do, that our country does better, our economy does better when there is a Democrat in the White House. And we're going to tell that story everywhere I go because I want the American people to understand clearly what the choice is. And there is no doubt that they, as you've seen in the last two debates, want to return to the failed policies of trickle-down economics. They want to make it easier for the super-rich and the corporations to have their way. That didn't work for America before, and we can't ever let it come back. We can't let the hard work that has been done by President Obama be ripped away. If you look at the last 35 years, we've had 5 presidents. 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. It is inconvenient for the Republicans to hear this, but Bill Clinton and Barack Obama inherited big problems from their Republican predecessors, and they had to fix what they found. And you know, in my husband's case, it was an exploding national debt, a bigger and bigger deficit, and problems in the economy. And after 8 years, which wasn't easy, we had 23 million new jobs. And most importantly, everybody's income went up. People at the top, people in the middle, people at the bottom. That's what's supposed to happen in America. We're supposed to be building prosperity for all, not just a few. And we ended up with a balanced budget and a surplus that gave us the opportunity, if it had been taken care of, to solve so many of our problems. You know, I joined the Senate as a senator from New York in 2001, and I was enthusiastic about representing that great state. But I quickly became very worried because the new Republican administration wanted to turn the clock back. Big tax cuts for the wealthy. And then we had 9/11. And we needed to pull together as a nation, which we did. And we needed to rebuild the Pentagon. We needed to rebuild New York. We needed to take care of our security. And the Bush administration cut taxes again. Then 2 wars, which they refused to pay for. The first time in American history that a president did not ask for money to pay for the wars that were being waged. They took their eye off the financial market, took their eye off the mortgage market. And you know what happened. You know, shortly after the 2008 election, President-elect Obama then, called and asked me to come see him in Chicago. I didn't know why. Turns out he wanted to ask me to be Secretary of State. But when I got there, what he wanted to talk about first was what a dangerous economic situation we found ourselves in. Because as bad as it was, it could have gotten worse. we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. People were losing their homes, their businesses, their hope. The President-elect said to me, look, we've got problems around the world, and we've got real problems here at home. I can't concentrate on both. I got to concentrate on the economy and try to pull us back out of that ditch, but I need you to go be Secretary of State and start rebuilding our leadership and our reputation around the world. And then the President got to work. It was not easy. And I don't think President Obama gets the credit he deserves for preventing us from falling further down and helping us get Now, we've recovered more than 12 million jobs. That's the good news. It is good news. Recovery is proceeding, but we haven't finished what we need to do. Incomes are not yet rising. We don't have enough jobs for people who need and want them. We have too many people who can't get full-time jobs, who are working part-time. We have a lot of problems in being able to get kids to afford to go to college, don't we? To be able to get in and then be able to finish, to get their education, and then if they do, they end up with this huge amount of debt that is stymieing their futures. So we have work to do in America. And I'm running for president to continue that work as a proud Democrat, as someone who has watched what works in America, not some abstract ideology that is all about helping the rich and nobody else. All about letting corporations do whatever they want to bust unions, exploit workers, pollute the environment. We cannot go back there. We must take a stand for our country. Yes, I said I'm going to be talking about that, so. It'll be soon. Just sit down. It'll be soon. Because I do care deeply that we combat climate change. And how are we going to combat climate change? By creating millions of clean energy jobs and millions of new jobs and businesses that will help us combat climate change and put Americans back to work. That's the kind of common sense solution that we know to achieve 2070 goals. Now, if you watch the two debates, you're blocking people, please. What I have said is you will hear from me shortly, and you will. But you're not going to hear from me today. So don't interfere with other people being able to participate, okay? There are many issues about the environment, not just one. And my job as your president is to put into place an effective program to create those clean energy jobs and to lead the world in combating climate change. And we've got the seats that are empty now, so people who are standing want to sit down. Please go right in and join us. So this election is a referendum on our future. There's no other way to put it. I am not running for my husband's third term. I'm not running for Barack Obama's third term. I'm running for my first term, but I'm going to do what works. And that's why I'm rolling out policy. Now, I've got a very strong agenda about how we can do more on growth, more on fair growth, more on long-term growth. And here are some of the things. Obviously, we need to raise the minimum wage. It is not possible to support a family on full-time work on the minimum wage. We need to close the parent interest loophole, something I called for back in 2007. That is absolutely a disgrace to let people have that kind of advantage. We need to close more loopholes and get rid of deductions that don't help the economy. but just give advantages to those who are in the financial services industry. We need to make sure we have equal pay for equal work because women have to be equal participants. And I want to see us provide incentives so that when you work hard, you can actually share in the profits that your hard work actually produced. And that means we need to incentivize businesses to do what the Market Basket did over in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, share those profits to the people who are in the top and the people who are trying themselves. I think we can raise incomes again, which is the single most important issue. Because people have to feel that their hard work is being rewarded. And then we have to make sure that as we reward that hard work, the prosperity is broadly shared. And from my perspective, there isn't even a fair comparison between where we as Democrats stand and where Republicans stand. But this election will not be easy. Because I think a lot of people are trying to figure out why things have gone off track. And they're frustrated. Some of them are even angry. The Republicans really do want us to have a case of collective amnesia, to forget how we got into the economic mess we ended up in. I'm already, arguing back and forth with some of the Republicans. You will hear them say, maybe you heard them say in the debate, this is the slowest recovery in history. That takes a lot of nerve. Why do we need to recover? Because their economic policies put us into the dip in the first place. And I'm going to say a word about organized labor. Unions help to build the middle class in America. And you can charge declining incomes with the decline of organized labor. It's a fact. And what the Republicans are trying to do, led by some of their presidential candidates, is to squash the rights of people to organize and bargain collectively. I think that's a terrible mistake. I believe in the balance of power. I think our founders were absolutely so smart. Not a balanced power. So much of the power is in the hands of the rich, the wealthy, the corporate interests. Who's going to stand up for everybody else? Unless you can organize, unless you can speak out, unless you can sit across the table. So I'm going to do everything I can to further the right to organize and bargain collectively. Because I think it's good for our economy and it's good for the middle class of America. Per capita, the highest wages in the advanced world are in Germany, right? They are highly organized. And they also do something that I want to see us do more of. They do apprentices and other programs to better prepare young people to have successful work lives. I said I will offer a tax credit to companies that pay for apprenticeships. I want to get that tradition started in America. I want more young people to get trained and get the skills to get good jobs in the trades, in the crafts, in advanced manufacturing, in computer coding, for goodness sake. We've got so many jobs that we should be helping young Americans get or mid-career Americans transition into. I will make that a high priority of my presidency. I will have people in the White House scouring the help wanted ads. And if there are jobs that are not being filled, then what do we need to do to help young Americans get the skills they need to fill those jobs? Because that, to me, is how we begin to reconnect our economy with the workforce and give more young people a better chance at their future. And going back to need to set some big goals. I come from a time when America set big goals. I can remember when President Kennedy said we were going to send a man to the moon and bring it back within the decade. A lot of people laughed at that. They said, we can't do that. We're not going to do that. Yes, we are. And we did it. Our businesses, our government, our great universities, inventors, people with creative ideas, our astronauts, everybody got together. Well, here are some goals I think we should set. By the end of my first term, I want us to install 500 million more solar panels. And by the end of my second term, I want us to have enough clean energy to power every single home in America. Well, let me just tell you, I spent a lot of time in Iowa these days, and Iowa already gets 30% of its electricity from wind. 30%. This is within our reach if we organize ourselves in the right way. If we move the financial and tax incentives away from fossil fuels to wind, to solar, to biofuels, about this because I know that if we as a nation decide we're going to do it, we will get it done. I also know that when it comes to education, we need more schools like this school. We need more schools that excite the learning of young people. I met a young man, Cooper, who did a project on me, which I gave an A+ to. I love to see that look in a kid's eye, that this is an exciting place to be in school. And we're learning because we have teachers that are really pushing us and stimulating us. I want that for every one of my kids, in every one of our schools. But I believe we've got to start in the early years, 0 to 5. We need early childhood education. What kind of world will be out there for her? How do we give every child in this state and across our country the same chance to live up to his or her potential? That is what I think about as I run for president. And early childhood education is one way to begin to offer more support to children. You know, 80% of your brain is physically formed by the age of 3. And just think about what that means. You've got a child like our granddaughter, we read, talk, and sing to her all the time. Honestly, I think her first words are going to be enough. We are pretty obnoxious about it. But we know it's not only something that we love doing, it's something that is building their brain. So that when she gets to school, she has a better shot of having the vocabulary and understanding the concepts that will get her off to a good start in school. And think about all the kids who are just as smart, just as naturally gifted, but who haven't had that opportunity. We need to rebuild the opportunity ladders in America. We need to help people get on that first rung and that second rung and go as high as they can. I don't think it's right that we are moving towards such an unequal society where some people have so many more opportunities than others. I'm the granddaughter of a factory worker. My grandfather went to work in the Scranton Lace Mills in Scranton, Pennsylvania, every day of his working life. He worked there to provide a living for his family, but also because he wanted his children to have a better chance. And he succeeded. Each of his boys went to college. And my dad, he ended up being a small businessman. And it was a really small business, but it provided a good, solid, middle-class life. My mom had a totally different experience. She was rejected and abandoned by her parents and her grandparents. And by the age of 14, she was out working as a housemaid in somebody else's home. She had so many of the odds stacked against her, but I'll tell you what made a difference. People were kind to her. I asked her, as I grew older and I realized that she had such a miserable life, so different from the one she gave to me. How did she not become bitter? Break down? I said, because at critical moments, somebody showed me that I mattered. And she talked about that first grade teacher saw she didn't have enough to eat and began bringing extra food without embarrassing her, saying, you know, I want too much food today. Better the entire year. Or the woman whose house she cleaned saying to her, I know how much you want to go to high school. If you get your chores done early in the morning, you can go to high school. You know, that may sound harsh today, but to my mother it was a gift. So she got up early, she got her chores done, she ran to high school. Did her classes, and she ran back to do the rest of her work. I tell you that because I believe that we got to rebuild those opportunity ladders. And we have to provide more support for families, starting with better jobs, with rising incomes, a higher minimum wage, early childhood education. But there are some things that only people can do for each other. Showing kindness, showing respect, helping somebody out. We need to do both in America right now. We've got too much anger, too much mean-spiritedness, too many insults in our political system, too many people acting like they have all the answers when nobody does. That's why we have to work together. That's the whole idea behind our democracy. So when I think about young kids, I think about my mom. And I think about what we need to do to help more young kids get that same chance. And then I think about how when kids get older, they deserve a chance to go to college. They deserve a chance to go as far as their hard work and ambition will take them, and too many are being shut out because of the cost. And then when they get out, they can't pay their debts. They struggle. I was with a young woman today at the University of New Hampshire. Her dream is to be a teacher. Teach social studies in middle or high school. She's got so much debt. She's living at home. Thankfully, the Affordable Care Act lets her get health insurance because that's one of the provisions for young people. She's not asking for a handout. She's asking for a handout. She's asking for her country to say, hey, we want to invest in you. And that's what I'm going to do by lowering the cost of debt, refinancing the debt. If you can refinance your house and refinance your car, you ought to be able to refinance a student debt. And I loved it when I mentioned the Affordable Care Act, and some of you cheered. Thank you so much, because we've only been trying to get that done for more than 70 years. I will defend it, but I also will work to improve it. We got to get the costs down. We've got to get more choices among insurers, and we've got to deal with the exploding costs of drugs and other issues in the healthcare system. But I want to quickly mention three things that are related to health. One, we need to figure out what we're going to do for chronic long-term care. Alzheimer's, autism, other diseases, conditions, accidents that leave a person unable to care for him or herself. We are relying on family members largely. And every family member I've ever talked to has said the same thing. They want to do that. They want to provide that care. But they're spending down their savings. They have no respite. They have no help. We've got to think this through. I don't believe we have all the answers yet. But I know it's only going to become a more pressing problem because people are living longer. So we're going to have more and more people who are facing these kinds of difficult caregiving situations in their families. The second thing I want to mention is mental health. You know, we're supposed to be treating mental health the same as physical health, and we are not. We are not giving the same resources and support. It's just not right. provide access to mental health, but you know insurance companies are not doing what we need them to do. You know that it's too expensive for most families. You know we don't have enough resources or trained people. So I'm going to really focus on mental health because there are a lot of people who are in need of some kind of support and they can't get it. And it's very connected to the epidemic of substance abuse that we are facing in our country. Oftentimes, because people have untreated mental health, they medicate themselves with alcohol and drugs. I did not think I'd be talking about substance abuse in my presidential campaign until I started campaigning. Everywhere I went, people said to me, what are you going to do about the heroin epidemic, about the opioids, about meth? And all of a sudden, everywhere I went, I kept hearing about it and the stories that people were telling me. So I have rolled out a substance abuse agenda where the federal government would partner with local governments and communities to try to provide more support. Yesterday in Laconia, New Hampshire, I had a town hall. It was packed, 700 plus people, all about substance abuse. That was the subject. Because in New Hampshire, at least, heroin is killing people. Hundreds of people. And in our country, we've had more deaths by overdoses in 2013 than we did by car accidents. We need prevention. We need treatment. We need a different model of law enforcement. We need to make sure law enforcement is equipped with Narcan and Naloxone so that they can help stop overdoses and prevent death. So I'm going to keep talking about it, and I'm going to keep raising it, and I'm going to keep challenging other candidates to come up with a plan to compare to mine, because I think it's one of the most important health issues we face. There's a lot of work to be done in the country, but I want to say I will defend our civil rights and our human rights, starting with a woman's right to choose, and I will defend I thought the way the Republicans talked about this issue, made up things about this issue, have threatened to shut down our government over this issue, shows not only an indifference, an insensitivity, maybe an obliviousness to what Planned Parenthood does for millions of women, but it also sends a message to the world that we can't govern ourselves. The idea you would shut down the United States government over Planned Parenthood, which does not use federal dollars to provide abortions, the vast majority of whose settings provide cancer screenings and family planning and contraceptives. It just makes no sense. It's nothing but pure partisanship to inflame people, to set people against each other. We have had enough of that. And we must stand up to it. And we must make it clear we will not tolerate that kind of political posturing. I will also defend marriage equality and work against discrimination. reverse this Supreme Court decision because I think it is so corrupting and pernicious. I will continue to support comprehensive immigration reform. I will support criminal justice reform. I will move against the era of mass incarceration and take low-level, nonviolent offenders out of our prison system and give them alternatives. And around the world, I will continue to stress diplomacy. You know, I did write a book about my 3 years as Secretary of State. And I know this from time to time, the Republicans say things like, well, I don't know what she was doing. I'm thinking of sending them all a copy. What do you think? But among many things I learned is there is no substitute for diplomacy. As hard as it is, as frustrating as it is, you just have to get up every day and keep working on it. I put together a coalition of nations that led to the sanctions against Iran. It was very hard work to get the Russians on board, to get the Chinese on board. And it took hour after hour of meeting and phone call and travel around the world to go to the capitals, to sit down, to make the case. But we finally got it done. And then I had to travel around the world enforcing it, convincing countries that were hungry for oil and gas not to buy it from the Iranians. And then finally the Iranian tankers were literally rusting in their ports. And they said, you know, we better start talking. It didn't happen overnight. I negotiated a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in November of 2012. I was shuttling back and forth between Jerusalem and the Palestinians and Cairo, where I negotiated with the Muslim Brotherhood president, President Morsi. It wasn't easy. It had to be done very delicately so that people were willing to take that leap, especially Hamas, pushed by the Egyptians, to stop raining rockets onto Israel. I appreciate the mention of clean cook stoves, because not everything you do are big headlines. I realize that the fourth leading cause of death in the world are respiratory illnesses from breathing in the smoke and the pollution from small cook stoves. The fourth leading cause of death. And who are most of the victims? Women and children, because who's cooking the food? Who's fetching the firewood? Who's starting the fire? Who's standing there and stirring the pot? Women and children. You know, while we're fighting over climate change and while the president's pushing forward, let's try to figure out what we can do on the ground to change the environment, to get the pollutants from soot and dark carbon and methane out of the atmosphere. I led the way in working with the Arctic nations. I'll tell you, that's where a lot of conflict over resources is going to take place. I'm against drilling in the Arctic. I think it's a mistake. I think we should do it. But we don't have the biggest territory on the Arctic. Countries like Russia, Canada, Denmark, Greenland. So we have to convince other people to go along with us. And then I'll tell you, the last story I'll tell you is when I became Secretary of State, all of you, the American taxpayers, were paying for medicines to treat people with HIV around the world. And we had 1.7 million people on treatment. And we had a certain amount of money that we could spend to buy those drugs. And I worked with my team to say, how can we get the cost down so we can actually deliver more medicine to more people? And we bought generic drugs. And by the time I left, we had tripled the number of people whose lives you are helping to save because we got smart about how to buy the drugs and deliver them more efficiently. So 5.1 million people are now alive thanks to the generosity of the American taxpayer. So I'm excited about what we can do together. I have no illusions about how hard this is. It's going to be a tough campaign. And I need each and every one of you. Thank you for coming today, but now I really need you to volunteer.
be part of the organization you're putting together in Maine, to talk to more friends and colleagues, to come out and caucus. I really want to put together an agenda for the future around which we organize. Because that will then give us a platform not only to win the election, but to govern. That's why I'm laying out these policies. You know, a lot of the people running, they just give you the top lines. I love the idea, I'm going to build the wall, I'll tell you how later. Okay, we're going to deport 11 or 12 million people? I can get it done. Oh, okay. Come on. You know, eventually everybody's going to say, wait a minute. The American electorate is savvy. We've been around a long time because we sort out all of these different claims and accusations, and we then decide what kind of future we're willing to bet on by who we vote for. So that's why I need you. I need you as my allies, my volunteers, my ambassadors, to stand with me as we put together a campaign that stands for America. So at the end of the day, it really is all about, for me, my mother, who inspires me every single day. You know, people say to me, oh my gosh, how can you take it? Well, because my mother took it. And my mother basically said, you know, when you're knocked down, you get back up. That's what I believe about our country. When we get knocked around, we have to pull ourselves together and stand up straight and keep walking forward. And I do it because of my granddaughter. Because I do not believe that my granddaughter should have any more of a chance to live up to her dreams in America than anybody else. You should not have to be the granddaughter of a former president to achieve your hopes and dreams in America. You should be able to be the granddaughter of a factory worker like me, or the grandson of a truck driver, the grandchild of any American who should have the same chance to live up to his or her God-given potential. That's what this is. Thank you all.